Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock, hard rock, and other forms of rock music. So we're back with my Hard Rock 7, which is a series that I'm running for 7 days. Started last Monday, will conclude tomorrow. Tomorrow conclude tomorrow. So basically what this is about, so I decided to do a series on hard rock, like I did one on progressive rock. The only thing was the progressive rock one were bands that were well known as the Big Six. This is not that way. These are 7 bands I've chosen who I think are the definitive 7 rock bands. These are my personal, and the qualifications is I had to like them because I had a problem with the original progressive rock series, in which there was a band in there I didn't follow much, so I didn't know much about them, and people made comments like, you shouldn't be commenting about something you don't know anything about. But I've been commenting about stuff I don't know anything about for my whole life, so I didn't want to change the format. Also, they had to have some notoriety, be well known, be a big influence on a lot of different bands out there, and in this case it's a huge influence, especially on guitar players from this particular one we're going to be talking about, and I thought they deserved to be on here based on that. So we are talking about Van Halen. Van Halen is today's band, hugely influential band, especially on guitar players from Eddie's style going forth. To me, this band is a lot like Aerosmith in a lot of ways. There's a lot of similarities between the band. They both have a prima donna frontman. They both have excellent guitar player, although I think Eddie's probably the better of the two, but still both excellent guitar players. They both do that sex, drugs, and rock and roll type of theme. They're both hard rock, catchy riffs and stuff like that. Both of them have a little bit of a bluesy influence as well. However, Van Halen, I think, takes it a step farther. That's the biggest difference. So this, I think, is Van Halen's. Well, Van Halen was from 78 till 2020 at Eddie's passing, and the band has probably been mothballed since then. So Van Halen, this album, 1978, probably their best album, their debut album. I think it's considered their best album. It's not my personal favorite, but it's certainly the album I think that most people consider their big album, their favorite, or the most influential of the albums. Their last album was called A Different Kind of Truth, which was released in 2012. So it's about a decade or so in the past now. So the members of this band include David Lee Roth, Eddie Van Halen, Alex Van Halen, Wolfgang Van Halen, Michael Anthony, Gary Cherone, Mark Stone, Sammy Hagar, and Gary, I said Gary Cherone already. So not a huge volume of members, like 7 or 8 there, over a, basically, what's that, pretty close to a 40-year career. That's pretty good. So the band is pretty much done now that Eddie Van Halen has passed. I don't think you'll be seeing any more of Van Halen. It's unfortunate that Eddie passed. Such a great guitar player, strong influence in the music. So their music, of course, many know it as being very sex, drugs, and rock and roll oriented. They did do some kind of that old bluesy style music that they like to do. I can't think of the name of it right now. They did do some of that stuff. They did lots of covers too, which is unusual. A lot of bands at that stage are just putting out their own stuff, but they had an album, Diver Down, that had a ton of covers on it. But the one thing about Van Halen is I think that most of the covers they did were better than the originals, in my opinion. Just such a huge influential band with so many great albums. Their classic era, I think, is the era of David Lee Roth from 1978 to 85, although I will give kudos to the people who did like the Sammy Hagar era, or Van Hagar if you prefer, from 1985 to 96. They They had lots of hits during that period too, and some people think of it as two different bands, although it's the same band. So maybe it got two classic eras, but for me, the one that I stopped listening to them after 1984 was released and finished and done, and I was done with Van Halen once David Lee Roth was out of there, him being my favorite member of the band. But I also recognize that he's very difficult to work with, I'm sure. Yeah, extremely difficult. So this band, again, released about 6 albums in a row in their David Lee Roth albums era. All were really good. I didn't have a problem with any of them. Some people have a little bit of a problem with Diver Down because of all the covers, but even if you didn't like the covers, there's still like some really good stuff on that album. Full Bug, little guitars, just some real strong stuff on that album. Yeah, this is the band that I believe influenced a lot of guitar players going forward. A lot of people loved Eddie Van Halen's style. He was one of the first ones to performing this style. I'd actually never heard anything like it before him. Nothing sounded anything like that. And so a lot of people got into that tapping sound that he liked to use. But he wasn't just a tapper too. He was an amazing acoustic guitar player just as well as he was an electric guitar player, and had a huge influence on so many different people. Many consider him to be the best guitar player in history. You might get some arguments from the Hendrix camp, and you might get some arguments from some other camps as well. He's not my personal favorite, nor do I think he was the best, but I can see why people think he was. He was extraordinarily gifted. So Van Halen has now passed from the rock scene and are no longer performing, but such a great band. Some of the stuff that they did with that flamingo guitar, he liked to do Eruption. Has there ever been anything before that sounded anything like that? And so what is that? I never heard anything like that before. Now a lot of people doing that stuff, but back then that was a first, very much a first. And this album, this album has a ton of hits on it. Running with the Devil, that's well known. You Really Got Me, the Kinks classic. Ain't Talking About Love, Jamie's Crying, Feel Your Love Tonight, and Ice Cream Man. These are all well known songs. Even the lesser known things like On Fire, Little Dreamer, and Atomic Punk, all really good as well. I'm the one you want. And then they went on to produce another great album in Van Halen 2, and then Women and Children First, which is where I came in. Such a great album with so many classic stuff, and that really strong Van Halen flavor to their music. Fair Warning, which is actually my favorite, probably my favorite Van Halen album. It sounds not as much like, they have some different stuff on there, kind of not as Van Halen-ish as I guess some of the other albums were, but of course it has Unchained and Mean Street, which are great hard rockers. Unchained maybe their best song, I think, overall. So there you have it, Van Halen. Love them or hate them, mostly love them. If you got any comments about Van Halen or anything, or any of their albums, or either of their eras, or about the members, or anything like that, please put it in the comments section below. Please like and subscribe, and just so you know, we only have one day left. Tomorrow's the final day and the last of this Hard Rock 7. I hope you'll show up for that, and we will see you then. So take care and good night.